my hope is that they can adjust their system in Belarus to be more effective, to effectively fight COVID-19, to effectively raise people out of poverty, to effectively move in a more socialistic direction, that they can establish better friendly ties with different countries around the world. My hope is that this doesn't degenerate into another like Euromaidan kind of situation. Because
Oh
if you look at
God.
Ukraine, that's been a mess, right? And my hope is that whatever happens, there can be a resolution to this, where the protesters' voices are heard on the one hand, but there's not there's not a regime change push coming from the United States. My hope is that this can be resolved because whenever this happens, and this is what gets my goat. I just don't get, Libya. They were saying to us, "Oh my God, Gaddafi is so awful." Well, look at Libya now, right? I mean. Yeah, I mean, no one in their right mind would say that Libya benefited from the 2011 NATO intervention. People said Iraq.
We did it, Patrick.
Yes.
We saved the city.
Yeah, right. Iraq, they said Saddam Hussein was so bad. Oh, well, look at Iraq now. Is anybody in their right mind going to say things have gotten better? Afghanistan, same story. And that, they always are trying to sell us this idea that that the Pentagon is a humanitarian rescue organization, and these people are being oppressed by this brutal regime that does brutal, awful stuff, and we have to intervene. Don't be an isolationist. Blah 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 blah. We've heard it over and over and over again, and the reality is that U.S. regime change destroys countries, and it has catastrophic results, not just for the country in question, but for the whole region. Usually, it leads to the expansion of terrorist groups, of drug gangs. Afghanistan, great example, now the heroin capital of the world. So, U.S. regime change operations, U.S. destabilizations, the U.S. State Department, backing and supporting protests that overthrow governments never leads to anything good. But yet, what shocks me is that every time it happens, not only do average normal people who watch CNN support it. I mean, you kind of almost expect them to support it.
Oh, yeah.
But a lot of communists do. And I cannot get my mind around this. A lot of Trotskyites, a lot of anarcho-communists, a lot of, socialists, libertarians, they cannot bring themselves to disapprove of a CIA color revolution. It's like they just, every time they see one, it's like, I don't know what it is. They just cannot bring themselves to not support it. I mean, it blows my mind.
I fully admit that I made that mistake once. I made that mistake once years and years
But you
ago,
learned.
and I will never do it again. And that speaks very much to the liberal mentality, because one of the news sources I watched when I originally started doing this whole YouTube thing was Keith Olbermann. Very, very big liberal. Very big liberal. He, every day, about the war, the crimes, KBR, Halliburton, malfeasance, taking public money and anything. And then when he got his own, and then he got taken off of MSNBC, I don't even know what happened there. But then when he got his own show on, I think it was Vice gave him a show. The very first show he did was with Michael Moore. Yeah, also, another big anti-war voice, turns around and starts bashing Gaddafi. Very first show. Because it was Obama.
Yep. Yeah, and I will say Gaddafi, he took a similar move prior to, the situation that ultimately led to his downfall. He thought the United States was his friend. He alienated the Palestinians. He alienated Russia and China in a lot of ways, and he thought that, he made this deal with BP. They returned the guys that were, I believe, falsely accused of being the Lockerbie bombers in Scotland, and they were returned to Libya, and they got a big parade. And I think Gaddafi was under the impression that the USA liked him, and he was dead wrong about that. I mean, he was absolutely wrong about that. But the Libya situation, right? You learned from it, right? Okay, yeah. You fell for it once. You learned from it. What blows my mind, right, is Susan Rice, who was like the second runner-up. She was like who Biden might have picked if he didn't pick Kamala Harris. She actually said that Gaddafi was distributing Viagra to men all over Libya to rape women. Okay? She said that. She said that. That's an awful allegation, right?
That doesn't sound made up at all.
And it turns out it was fake, right?
Amnesty International.
Yeah. Oh, Amnesty International went to Libya. It was not true. Okay, they could not find anything to back that claim up. I mean, it didn't add up. Amnesty International said it's not real. Other people, but it's like that's a really nasty lie. I mean, and it's like when you tell a lie that's that nasty and that extreme, and it motivates people to then support the violent overthrow of a country that results in probably at this point at least hundreds of thousands of deaths, if not millions, right? Libya at this point is such a disaster. There are parts of the country that don't have electricity. There are people getting on rafts in the Mediterranean trying to flee to Europe. There were reports about open air slave markets and human trafficking. I mean, it's like you tell a nasty lie like that, number one. That lie then is used to justify an awful military intervention that destroys the country and kills hundreds of thousands of people. That should be a scandal, right? I mean, that's like Nuremberg kind of stuff. There was one of the guys who was executed and convicted at the Nuremberg trials was named Julius Streicher. And Julius Streicher, he didn't run any gas chambers. He didn't run any trains taking people to concentration camps. He was the propagandist who justified the Holocaust. He made children's books demonizing Jews. He made little films that were showed, and he was the guy who he didn't do the Holocaust. He did the propaganda for the Holocaust, right? And they hung him at Nuremberg for that. Well, I mean, look at what American media does. I mean, every time there's a war, they just turn up the volume with the lies. They just turn up the volume. Every rumor, everything, and then afterwards we find out it's not true. Great example. Just one more thing is the Naria testimony, right? In the lead up to the Gulf War, this woman was crying. She was on CNN, like on loop, saying that Saddam Hussein's soldiers were taking babies out of incubators and throwing them on the floor. Turns out she had never been to the hospitals that she was talking about. The woman testifying was a member of the Kuwaiti royal family, and she wasn't even testifying under oath. The whole thing had been staged by a private PR firm. It was unbelievable, but the American people fell for it. They were convinced, oh, yeah, we have to send troops to fight Saddam Hussein. Look, they're throwing babies in incubators. It was a lie. It was just a big lie.
Yeah, I like to call it the Orientalist fallacy, where I'm not even sure Orientalist is, but you'll know what I mean. You can say anything, make up any like insanely evil thing that is like ridiculous beyond any conception, and they'll believe it. Oh, Kim Jong-il said he bowled a perfect game or got 100 perfect hole-in-one golf game or whatever. And then I would say, how do you know that's true? And they would say, oh, those people, they're always crazy. And we know they're crazy because of these crazy things they do. And we know they did those crazy things because they're crazy. It's the whole circular reasoning behind all that. And it's very easy to scare people with the image of, them bloody Islams, taking this, taking that. And I gotta admit, I've learned a lot about Iran just from being on Press TV. And even I admit, at first, I didn't really know anything. I wasn't like really anti or pro Iran. I was just like, whatever, just anti the war. That's the bottom line. But since then, I've learned like quite a bit about how Iran is, and it's very, very far from the big scary turban man on top of everything, making a theocracy.